basically have a lot of tools that support compliance. It is complex, and you absolutely need to engage an expert in compliance. So don't. This is like your like little legal thing. I'm glad it popped up after the recording started because now there's proof. Take the information that I'm providing you today as your starting point, right? Explore your own compliance regulations, your own compliance risk profile, right? And build from there. What I'm going to do is give you a little bit of an introductory and kind of clarify some points. So basically, I am going to share my screen if Piper will give me permission to do a screen share.
I can. You got it.
Or Keith. Okay,
Yep,
cool.
you got it.
Yep. Excellent. That was so fast.
Service with a smile.
I love it. All right, guys. So basically, our goal today is to talk about how you can balance out your compliance, the cost, the cybersecurity element, and the compliance regulatory element of it as well. I'm Jaime Moore. I am a solution advisor at Blackpoint Cyber. I also manage our partner success team, so it's my job to help communicate to end customers about the value of cybersecurity and making sure that everyone has the tools and information that they need in order to make really good decisions about their cybersecurity. I came out of a IT background. I went to school for web programming. I worked for an IT company for 8 years, and then I joined Blackpoint Cyber about 2 years ago. Before then, I was a funeral director. It's a little fun fact. But anyway, moving on from that, and I'm just passionate about helping people make the right choices. So today's agenda, actually, I have a ton of information to share with you guys.
Hmm.
I want to talk about compliance versus security. They are not the same thing. People think they're the same thing. They are not. I want to talk about the threat landscape. It is changing and it has been intense this year. Then we're going to talk about the cost of not paying attention to compliance. And finally, like I said at the very beginning, we will talk about some of the tools that Blackpoint through NetVPro offers to help you get to that security goal. But if you pay attention to 1 through 3, even if you're not buying anything we're selling, you're still going to learn to get value out of today. All right. So let's start on that agenda. Compliance versus security. Compliance itself is actually not a technical problem, right? Compliance is more something that is going to affect everyone in the organization. It is going to actually be a binary decision. So, unlike so many things in cybersecurity, you're either right or you're wrong. You're either compliant or you are not compliant. And it's kinda nice, it's comforting. I like a world where there's not a gray area. It's, very, very satisfying for our type A, super hyper organized folks. And the difference between compliance and cybersecurity is that compliance is mandated either by a law or a regulatory agency. Um, a lot of times, because it is regulated and they are trying to fit every solution and every business model in it, the technology recommendations can actually be quite vague. And that is a challenge. I think that is what causes so much concern and heartburn for the people trying to make technology decisions around compliance because the rules aren't super clear, and that makes it hard. So earlier, when the we were talking about binary pass fail, when things are vague, it's hard to know how you can pass, and sometimes it comes down to whether your auditor thinks you're passing or not, right? So that is an individual interpretation of the information. Finally, not a point in time. You don't bloop, get compliant and you're done. And then you're always compliant. It is an ongoing process. So once you decide to go down that road of compliance, you need to know that that is a lifestyle, not a destination. All right. And then finally, it is impossible to achieve compliance without also including cybersecurity. If you mess this up, the consequence for failing compliance is fines, punishment from your regulatory industry, loss of clients, right? These are pretty defined penalties for not achieving your compliance. On the flip side, when we're talking about cybersecurity, We're talking about risk management. We want to understand all of the good things you've got going in your environment, all of your assets, and imagine what could go wrong. That's our job. We are very pessimistic. We are quite imaginative, and it's our job to live in that area so that we can understand how to keep your risk as minimal as possible. There are also lots of shades of gray, there are overlapping solutions, and there are different risk profiles. Some people might decide, I like living life by the edge. I don't care if my whole server gets ransomware. Doesn't matter to me. I'll just wipe that puppy out and restore from backup. Hackers can have my data. Nothing I own is critical, right? That's a risk profile. Or there's that like hyper aware, very scared actor. I don't want anyone on my network doing anything that I don't know about. I don't want any data to leave my ship, right? Like, again, it's a risk profile. So you have people on different ends of that spectrum. And you guys, when you're making your decisions about security and compliance, you need to figure out where you live, right? And a lot of that is going to be controlled by your IT and your personnel. You need to have the right people in place in order to achieve the desired goal. You need to have a mindset of security that applies across the board, all of your employees. Everyone is involved in cybersecurity, not just one person. All right. Finally, your security is going to be constrained by budget. I might like to turn, and I like to compare this to physical security, right? Might like to turn my house into like a fortress, like gated entry, armed security guards. Like I had someone walk up to my car the other night. I must have left it unlocked. Opened the door, went in, went through all my stuff. I didn't leave anything valuable in there for the win. But I came in and like that space has been violated, right? So I want my car behind a locked entryway. Like I want my guard dogs outside patrolling the area. But there's costs associated with that. I don't get that level of protection for my home because I'm not willing to pay for it.
Building
So
a moat is not inexpensive.
exactly, that's exactly it, Keith. So it's one of those things where you do need to understand your budget and you need to pick smart tools for security. You need to pick tools that aren't doing the same job, tools that are adding bang for your buck, and actually going to make the most of that limited resource, which is your budget. And then finally, you have to have it in order to be compliant, right? So they are related. It's not completely separate, but they are different concepts. And I think it's really important to understand that. And then finally, what happens when security is breached? Well, that's risk. That is, your business gets ransomware, your servers get smushed, your data ends up on the web for purchase, or your customers all learn that you've been ransomwared. And that has cost associated with it. So what we are doing is we're moving these two concepts to the center and looking at your overall safety. That's the goal of compliance with security. They have the same purpose, the shared goal, but they're different entities. And one requires the other. Compliance mandates security. Security doesn't necessarily mandate compliance. Easy peasy. Why does this all matter? All right. Well, meeting and understanding the security requirements for whichever compliance metric you have to follow is pretty important. They are set out in order to protect your data and your clients and your business. So ignoring those things and leaving those things exposed can be pretty damaging to your business. Also, the modern day adversary, the bad actor that we are facing today is not the same as yesterday or the day before, right? They are constantly getting smarter, faster, more sophisticated because they're working around the security tools that we have in place. They don't discriminate, they don't care if a business is huge or small because of the prevalence of these types of attacks. If there was only a couple people acting at this like elite level of hacking and successfully breaking into environments, if you're a super small business, maybe you wouldn't have to worry about it. Be like, oh, no one's going to care about me, right? I don't need cybersecurity. No one cares about my a small accounting firm. I only have like 10 customers. I'll probably be fine. The problem is that protection through security through obscurity just doesn't work in today's threatscape because attacks are happening every single second, right? You just have to have one foot out of line and someone's going to see it and exploit it. And it's just so prevalent. Uh, People across the globe, everywhere, can attack your business because it's all connected with the internet. And that's frightening. So what we want to do is make sure that you treat security as your key concern in compliance, and that you work with experts, Blackpoint, NetVPro, maybe someone who is specialized in your compliance field. You all work together in order to make sure that you guys have a posture when it comes to your regulatory compliance requirements that you're comfortable with. Threat landscape today. It really is scary out there. Like I try not to be dramatic. I don't need to like sell through fear, uncertainty, and doubt. They call it FUD, right? In the biz. Because it's just crazy. The average cost of a data breach for everybody, $4.24 million. Okay, that everybody doesn't look like my everybody. Like my people are really the small to mid-sized business people. Average ransomware demand for small to mid-sized business in 2021, so as of the data we have to date, was $54,000. That went up. Last time I gave the statistic, it was like $42,000. Still, that's someone's salary. It's increasing. And I don't know of any small to mid-sized business that is comfortable just sitting on $54,000 just in case they get ransomware. That's the risk, right? That's the problem that you need to solve. And what we're going to do is make sure that you've got a plan in place to not incur a $54,000 hit. The types of exploits that we are seeing. This is really interesting to me. Everyone went home, and marketing people everywhere for cybersecurity companies started saying, everyone's getting ransomware, right? Like threats are going through the roof, like everyone's getting hacked. And we saw some activity that did monopolize on COVID right away, when everyone went work from home in 2020. Few things like trying to like offer vaccines for sale and stuff like that. It was crazy. But what we saw more of about 6 months after, so it took a while for the hackers to get geared up. They were figuring out COVID too, right? So about 6 months after that happened, what we saw was an increase in VPN exploits. So a VPN is a virtual private network. It is a secure way for your business to remote in to your network and work from anywhere, right? So VPN use did increase notably, and so did exploits of that technology. So we started to see all of the name brands. I'm not brand shaming anyone that you see here. Uh, all of them, all the big guys, got targeted. Exploits were found in their code and were exploited. We also saw some really interesting ransomware activity, like just going through the roof. We're seeing still like Conti, so oldie but a goodie. We're seeing lots of Conti attacks right now, lots of lemon duck attacks. We're seeing all kinds of ransomware. If you're not familiar with that term, I've used it a lot today, so I'm sorry for not defining it already. Ransomware is, of course, when a bad actor gets onto your computer, encrypts your machine, and offers to sell you access to your data back. That's bad. But over the past year, what we have seen is a double extortion. And now, when a bad actor gets onto your environment and encrypts your data, they don't just encrypt it, they actually export it off site because they know you probably have backup disaster recovery plan in place. You can afford to have your data encrypted now because you've got 10 copies of it. It's just which one you want to pick to reinstate. So what they do now is they actually just say, fine, I don't care. Restore your data. Probably be easier to pay me the ransom, but you can rebuild. That's fine. I'm just going to make my money by calling all of your customers and telling them that I'm going to release their data one by one if you don't pay me, right? So that's a level of extortion, taking the information that they stole from you and using it as blackmail, either by going after your brand and your reputation with your customers or your customers. There was actually a incident in the I believe it was Ukraine, but I'm not certain. But basically a mental health care provider, an online mental health care provider, was attacked. Their data was all stolen and encrypted, and they were like, no, we're not going to pay the ransom. We've got backups. We're fine. The bad actors began contacting the patients and threatening to release video transcripts, written transcripts of the notes from their care providers about the private moments that were shared with them. That is heartbreaking that these people who were trying to get help to get their lives sorted out were exploited in that manner. So we have to be very, very aware that our data is not just something we need to preserve for ourselves, but we need to preserve it for our end customers. So when we start talking about compliance, that higher level of requirement and security and trust is the result of that higher level of the importance of the data you have, be it medical or financial or credit card data, right? Once you have that higher value information, you need to be held to a higher standard to protect it. The cost if you don't. Now, I have to say that over the past years in my experience in IT, I know many compliant required business that have just opted to not care about it. We'll just sign, oh yeah, sure, we do HIPAA, we're good, right? Or the same for financial or PCI. An interesting thing for you guys, and I'm going to pick on healthcare for a while in this just because I happen to have a lot of data. But you can use these concepts and apply them for your own regulatory industry. And in fact, this first data point is actually saying 26% of the U.S. economy is from businesses that have some sort of compliance requirement. What we have seen over the past year is a 400% increase in enforcement of those compliant activities. So 400% more likely to have to prove that you're compliant. Of those, 94% of businesses fail their initial audit. Well, that's bad. That does not make me feel good about my own private information that is out and being held to these businesses. All right. So my urging for you guys is to put a plan in place before this happens, right? Before you get asked to prove it, because you need to make sure that when you get asked to prove it and you get audited, it is not a traumatic experience. You just hand over the information and you're good to go. Again, picking on healthcare, 17,000 medical records are breached on average every single day. Okay, that's scary. Again, as someone who has seen a doctor before in my life, I don't necessarily want my personal health information out there, including my things like my social security number and like things that could be used to exploit me in other ways, steal my identity, right? They have my birthday. They have my hair color, my eye color, right? Like they have everything. This is not good. Though I can change. I can change this. It's all right. Healthcare organizations, 89% of them have experienced a breach. So again, even if you don't care about following your compliance, you should absolutely care about your security. You do not want to add to this problem. And then finally, 86% of these breaches result of human error. So even if you have the right security solutions in place, if you don't take that final step and train your people and have ways to detect the problem and respond to it, you're still at risk. So that's the state. What this looks like. So case study for you guys. Talking about healthcare. We saw one of those VPN exploits. We were brought in after the fact. A lot of times people seek out cybersecurity solutions after the bad action has already gone down. And what we saw in this event is actually a bad actor accessed an unpatched vulnerable firewall. So they didn't have a good MSP, managed service provider like NetVPro, making sure their appliances were up to date. Bad actor got in. The endpoint device didn't see that activity. Domain credentials. So basically, the bad actor was able to acquire admin password within 15 minutes of the breach. So they came in, just had basic user access. They were able to jump up their creds and become an admin in 15 minutes of being in that network. They stole all of the electronic health information from this business. They created a bunch of share mounts. This is what they used to, folders located around the environment were used to put ransomware on the machines. And then the threat actor, which was NetWalkers, a known organization, executed a mass ransomware attack and exploited, extorted the business for money. Even though they had backup in this case, they said, we're going to release all this information unless you pay us. It was not good. What allowed this to happen was poor IT management, routine patching was slow, and it didn't target all of the devices. They did it on the computers, but they didn't patch the firewall, firewalls. So again, compliance is created to prevent this narrative from happening. If the compliant controls have been followed to have processes in place to ensure all network gear is patched, to ensure that proper endpoint and discovery tools are in place on every machine, to ensure that admin escalations are observed and responded to. If the right compliance measures have been being followed in this case, this could not have happened. And that is the purpose of these compliance measures. It is not to be mean. It is not to extort fines out of you. It is to help you know what you should do in order to stop this story from happening to you. We saw a very similar thing, totally different organization. We were deployed, luckily, in time in this case, right before the ransomware actually was deployed into a city. Bad actor got access to the network via phishing. So they sent a tricky email and a user opened it. They moved to a legacy 2003 server. 2003. It is, what year is it? 2021. We should not be using servers that I was using when I was like originally going through school. Like we need to do better, guys. All right.
That's really squeezing all the juice out of the lemon right there.
That is a fully utilized asset. That's you did its job. It's time to retire it. Fully utilized. All right. They stole domain credentials from the environment. They moved to all of the servers in this case. This one doesn't show how bad it was. There was a dispatch server and a 911 server involved in this. So the dispatch would be the phone system, right? That dispatch was using. 911 was the database storing all of the information. Basically they tested their shares. Now we were deployed right before it. There were 2 devices that ended up ransomware because we weren't on those machines. We protected the city. They did not actually end up in the news. Good. Yay. But again, proper compliance, following proper compliance measures would have stopped this from happening. The money, I'm not going to spend time here, guys. I feel like we've really hit this one down. It's not just the breach that's the problem. It's the fines that get applied if you're not following your compliance regulations. So let's go ahead and talk about what you can do to actually protect yourself. Have the right pieces in place, the access controls, making sure only authorized people can get to the data, endpoint protection. Each device has both antivirus and detection mechanisms on it to stop something bad from happening and detect when something bad has happened. Monitoring and auditing. You have to ingest all of the logs from all of your different data sources, your file integrity monitoring, your Windows events, your fire logs. That's a new one, Keith. Have you heard of a fire log?
Well, it means something different for a guy from northern Wisconsin.
Yeah. So firewall logs, right? All of the activity your firewall is doing, you need to store that. Network security, you got to have those systems in place to block that access. And then finally, backup and disaster recovery. You have all of these elements that are mandated by your compliance, and you have the right assessments, policies, and procedures and training to make sure they are all being used correctly and that everyone in your organization understands their role in data prevention. And you put these things in the right spot and you're going to be in a really good fit. Now, Blackpoint does help. I promised that I would talk a little bit about what we do to assist you in this. We provide 24/7 managed detection and response. Our job every single day, and this is applicable to any customer, whether they're in security or a compliant regulated industry or just any business that doesn't want to have all their data stolen from them. We are going to detect threats and respond to threats around the clock. We are going to do the same thing for any Microsoft Office 365 email accounts, SharePoint accounts, OneDrive, all of that, detect and respond to threats. Snap Defense allows us to have patented endpoint technology that feeds our team the data they need to accomplish those goals. And then finally, the new offering, this came out in late in the summer. This is what allows us to now move into this compliance industry, the ability to efficiently ingest and store all of your logs so that that data is available for that forensics analysis after an incident. This also includes the ability for you guys to build detailed compliance reports. So we come in, we are gathering all of the information from your firewall, your Windows events, and your file integrity monitoring. That's who's accessing, changing, modifying your files. And we store that for you. And then when you need to say, okay, I am HIPAA compliant, I am PCI compliant, I am CMMC compliant, you have a guide to step you through question by question. What is Blackpoint doing for you? And what else do you need? What do you need to have those training and procedures and policies in place to take care of? Again, this is pass fail stuff, guys. It's not as complicated as it sounds. You read the control. Do you do it? Yes or no? If the answer is no, when are you going to do it? That's your process for getting compliant. When and how. And so you work through that over time and then you maintain it moving forward. What kind of questions do people have?
There's a question about fines, and when we think about fines, and kind of how fines relate to the cost of like ransom, for example. And I'm wondering about number one, in general, how do those things compare? And then I'm also wondering about per instance fines.
Yeah. So again, this is going to be different depending on whichever compliance model you're following. But these fines are typically going to relate to the type of incident and to the number of associated records that were exposed. So your cost of the breach from the security side might look like a list of X amount of hours to rebuild a server, replacement of hardware, upgrade of hardware, downtime where we couldn't bill our customers, right? Lost brand reputational damage, that kind of stuff. That's what's going to combine to make your cost on the data breach side. On the fine side, you're going to see like missing, they're going to audit you. They're going to say, oh, they had an incident. Now we're going to pull back and see all of the problems. Missing your business BAS. I forget what that one stands for, guys, but that is basically the document that all of your vendors signed that say, yes, we're going to handle your data correctly. Late breach notification. So they didn't, in this particular case, tell people about the breach fast enough. Ineffective compliance program. They weren't doing their due diligence. Malware. So they had malware in their system. Unencrypted devices. That's the cost of actually doing the unencryption, and the patient testimonials and press release. So in this case,
And
very, very expensive event.
And some of those things are mandatory depending on the scope of the breach. So if you're in HIPAA and you have a certain number, I can't remember if it's 50,000, I can't remember the record number, but you have to do a mandatory press release.
Yep.
You don't get to pick and choose. You have to do a mandatory press release to a media, to a specific media outlet, or not specific, but to a media outlet.
Yep.
One of the other things I was wondering about, Jamie, is and one of the things that kind of freaked me out about HIPAA, because I've been in HIPAA spaces and PCI places and other compliance, but was the personal liability. From a technology person perspective, HIPAA put some teeth in it for personal liability as a technology leader. Do you have any information on that or any thoughts on that?
I do not. I'll just be straightforward with you. That's outside of my scope with compliance. That's why you should work with an expert on compliance. But
If you have
personal
HIPAA data, you might want to investigate that. I actually went and got personal liability insurance because when you have a certain volume of records, HIPAA took the step of making you personally liable for those. Or if there's a breach, the individuals who are involved in the breach can now pursue that person. So, like, you're at.
Do you have any information that I've heard a while ago, and this is also related to OSHA as well as the HIPAA entity, is that they are now becoming more and more self-funded. So you're seeing them go after more and more people, and fines are getting higher and higher, is one of the reasons that it's how they actually get their funding.
So when you're saying they, who are we talking about? Like the
the HIPAA organization, the Department of Health and Human Services, or whoever that falls under, and OSHA is another one that is also becoming more self-funded through these fines that they're generating.
Yeah, which is probably a part of that 400% increase in actual enforcement of these things, right? And that kind of, I'm not going to share my personal views on that, but I think that's definitely something to be. Hey, sometimes my face is really loud, guys. But again, take this stuff seriously. Try not to get wrapped up in the injustice of it or your personal feelings on it. And again, I mean, this is the same thing like when I'm dealing with my like political opposites of the in-laws or whatever. Look at the goal. The goal is safe, healthy access for everybody to your data and your health care or your financial care or whatever. That's the goal. So let's put the controls in place to get that.
Go ahead. Things that I saw or that I've observed, I haven't been in the industry for a little while, but I was thinking of it as a target. In the center of the target was the large healthcare providers, the large healthcare networks. And that was who was kind of initially targeted. They're going after that from a regulatory compliance perspective. And then that target expands out. So they go from the large healthcare providers to, like like senior citizens places, those large senior citizen homes, and then and they just keep going out based on the concentration of data, the ability to get large data sets. They become the next one to get addressed. So, as we're thinking about that, if you're in a hospital environment, you're probably, compliance is something that you're used to talking about. If you're in an adult care facility, it might just be starting to get intense for you right now because that next ring is where it's being focused upon.
One group that I found that might have been a little slow to all this is the nonprofit healthcare, because they were, we're nonprofit, you can't really fine us, but they really don't care.
They're don't care.
Fine you as much anyway.
Yeah. We don't.
Oh, go ahead, Jamie.
Honestly, if you are playing in that space, you are responsible for protecting that data. And being a nonprofit doesn't protect you from that responsibility, either as a human or as someone who wants to avoid those fines.
It's interesting for me in working with different organizations. When a large company is surprised by the fact that they have HIPAA data, in the past, I was working with a large trucking organization, and that organization has drivers, and they have driver records and medical information in their HR department. And to have the HIPAA discussion, at first, they kind of looked at me like I had two heads in that conversation. But then after we explored it a little bit, they're like, oh, yeah, we do have HIPAA data here, and it does apply to us. So,
Yep. Law firms too. Law firms, a lot of times, especially if they're doing any kind of litigation for accidents, motor vehicle accidents, you know, harm when you're on someone's property and you fall down and break your leg and then you sue them because their like stair was wobbly or whatever. That's HIPAA data, right? So law firms a lot of times have that kind of regulated information. They don't even know about it.
So are there any other questions? Because I don't want to monopolize the time.
Yeah, Jamie, what other reports are capable out of your latest offering?
So the offering is new. So I'm like super interested in hearing what reports you want. Right now, we do HIPAA, PCI, CMMC's level 1, 2, and 3. So out of the box, those are the reports that we have available. And again, tell me which ones you need, because that'll be it's just a matter of mapping at this point. We intend to be adding. So,
okay, thank you.
Yeah, and you don't have to answer this second. I think Keith was like, "Oh, I want like 900." Just let us know. Let Keith know, and we will.
Well, I had a question. I had a question about the tool, because one of the things that I did in my past and that I've used as a tool is I have a set of questions, or basically a survey that talks about the compliance domains and all that stuff. Is that how your tool works? Is that it asks questions about your compliance landscape, if you will, and then you can do an assessment, or you can provide current state information based on what your tool is seeing? Or how does that work when you kind of mentioned the compliance report?
So what our tool does is it is mapped to auto answer every compliance question where we are already satisfying either some or all of the requirement. So something like monitoring privileged activity in the environment. We do that. We monitor, we respond when any high consequence privileged activity is going on, and we review it live. So that one's good. Check, box check. How and why is included in our evidence section. So we say we do this because we XYZ. And then the customer also has the ability to add any additional information. So if they are also doing it by training users, and making sure only admins have admin access, and if there's policies and procedures, you can add evidence. So you can actually enter the information, what you use to complete that control or add to that control. And when you're done answering each question one by one, adding all of your evidence, you can actually export that and hand it over to an auditor. You can export it as a PDF. And if you've hyperlinked any of this to locations in your environment, if you've given your auditor access to say, oh, local 1 point, or 1 point, OneDrive file that has, images or, whatever supporting equipment, they can access all that. It's all there right for them. It makes it really quick and painless to do that audit. And the faster you make them get done and get out of your lives, the better off you are.
Yeah.
So
Right.
that's how the tool works. It answers the questions with anything we do and gives you ability to edit the answer and add your own evidence for anything we don't do. Not one tool is going to do everything.
Yeah, to kind of piggyback on that, I've had many years of experience with SOX audits and FRB audits. And if you can't answer a question, that's where you really start getting into trouble, because then they start digging, oh, well, you don't know the answer to this. And they really start drilling down, and you don't want that to happen.
Yeah, saying I don't know is bad. Being deficient is okay if you know you're deficient and you have a plan around how to become compliant. But having didn't mean to do that one. Having the zero, sorry.
This is recorded, Keith.
We'll edit that part out. but we'll use this finger, the safe finger. But The deer in the headlights look is
Yeah.
not a good thing. And Ken is 100% right. If you have that during an audit experience, they will drill down into that, just like, yeah, your dentist with no Novocaine.
That was our first SOX audit, and after that, we were ready after that.
Yeah, no, and there's no amount of chocolate or bribery that can get you away from that, because those auditors have no sense of humor at that point.
Well, and the auditors too, it depends on who you're getting, right? I have worked with some who are okay, yeah, that's good, yeah, that's good, and then others are like, but tell me how this one works, right? And it's probably
Right.
because they've sniffed onto something, right? And they're gonna pull everything apart, and they have their own working interpretation of the letter of the law, and by golly, they're gonna apply it everywhere. And so yeah, it's subjective, and the best you can do to arm yourself with practical controls that don't break the bank, which is what we deliver, and your ability to communicate those controls to your auditor. It'll make your life better.
Yeah. Does and maybe you don't know it, I'll just ask this. Do you know of anybody else in the marketplace that has that ability with the way, I mean, so really that compliance thing is a great communication tool. Is that something that's new to the marketplace, or, I mean, is that a
So
specialized flavor you guys have?
I would say that our ability to combine the information, like the auto population of all of the questions where we're meeting the demands, that's unique to us. There are other groups that like specialize and you can contract with to be your compliance manager. And you know, honestly, I would like my tool set to be a part in your compliance journey, but it's okay if you decide you want to offload the responsibility to a professional who handles just compliance. I think there's benefit in doing that, whether or not they use our report builder or not. Our log aggregation, our cybersecurity is still going to get the job done. So.
Very good. Any other questions for Jamie? This is a great session today, Jamie. A lot of information. If somebody wants to, see a demo of the tool or learn more about it, definitely can get a hold of NetVPro, or I would assume there's examples out on the Blackpoint website information.
And demos request. We do those demos on demand so that we can show you exactly what you need. Also, our competitors can't reverse engineer our stuff, so
Right.
reach out to NetVPro, and you can get general information on the website. By all means, check it out. But Keith and Sheila and the team there is going to help you out. So
Yeah. All right. Very good.